Hello friends, my name is Shashank and welcome back to my channel Corporate Guy, and today in this video we're going to talk about ISO 31000 for the risk managers, and this is a very important topic for all the risk management professionals, and we will try to cover this topic as quickly as possible. So if you are interested in this topic and you want to learn more about this, stay tuned throughout this video. At the end of this video we will also talk about some of the MCQs where you can test your knowledge after this, at the end of this presentation. This video might be quite long, so if you are really want to understand, you might take your time, sit down and start taking the notes. So let's start this video and we will just quickly go through all the important parts of the ISO 31000 and how it can help you and how you can implement that in your organization to help understand and mitigate the risks of your organization. So first of all, let's just understand what is ISO 31000 is, right? So ISO 31000 is an international standard for the risk management and for the risk manager professionals, right? So as you can see, so this ISO 31000 standard consists of three important broad subtopics, which are known as the principles, the framework and the process, which we will talk about in the as we progress through the presentation and the tutorial. So just keep in mind the principles, framework and the process, right? And the primary goal of this framework or this whole standard is to provide a consistent vocabulary. So what is a consistent vocabulary? It means that the terminologies, the words which we use, it should be common among all professionals, not only in one particular state or a nation, but worldwide. It should be consistent so that it is very easy for everybody to understand how the vocabularies are used, how the terminologies are used, and what are the methodologies are used for the risk manager. And similar thing has been used, if you have seen in the fire and safety, they have similar vocabularies, they have similar methodologies, and they have similar tools which are universal tools, right? So this is a kind of framework which is ISO 31000 is trying to provide for the risk managers, right? And next is it is designed so that it can be integrated and compatible with the existing management system, which means that you don't have to redefine your existing management systems or the risk management professionals or your management systems like IMS. So it can be very easily integrated into your existing system, so you don't have to redefine your existing processes. So that is a very important part of it, and it emphasizes on the integration of risk management into all the organizational functions, such as decision making and the culture, rather than being a standalone system. This is not a standalone system, which means that if you have a company's culture, right, and you have some of the predefined systems, you have your own frameworks, you have your own principle, but if you integrate ISO 31000 into all of this, it will very easily integrate with all of these existing frameworks, so you don't have to redefine anything, right? So that is the important part of it. And it serves as a valuable benchmark for internal and external audits, right? It provides you to stand out among all the risk management frameworks, or among the different organizations which are basically focused on managing the risk. So if you have these standards and frameworks implemented in your organization, so you have that chance to stand out and showcase that you have these frameworks which are international, in the guidelines of international guidelines and the international standards, right? So that is how it helps you. And the purpose of the ISO 31000 is to provide the guidelines, right, on managing risk of any type of organization, which means that it doesn't say that these are the requirements for any organization, so that only then you can start implementing the ISO 31000, which means that any type of organization, regardless of its size, even if you have 10 people, you can start implementing 31000, right? So the activity, what kind of activity is going on in that organization, and what kind of sector it is. So it doesn't just define or divide or have those minimum required standards or requirements for anybody to start implementing 31,000, right? So this is how it works. What is the aim? So the aim of this standard is to improve the performance, right? That how security or the risk management systems are performing, to encourage innovation, to support objective achievement. So what is the objectives? Objective is your organization's vision, mission, or whatever they have, strategic goals. So that is how you can use ISO 31,000 to achieve those objectives, right? So this is just a brief introduction about the ISO 31,000, and I hope this is clear for you, right? So let's start and just talk about a little bit more about the origin of this standard. So this was first introduced in 2009, right? So it was introduced in 2009, and after that it has been revised so many times, and I think the latest revision was confirmed in 2018, and which was confirmed in 2023 for the next 5 years. So the simple, if you look at the timeline, so 2009, and then it was revised in 2000, let's say 18, and then in 2023 it was confirmed that it will be following the same framework for the next 5 years, right? So these are the timelines for this standard, right? So next, let's talk about some of the key concepts and the definitions which are very important for everybody to understand before you even start understanding the ISO 31,000 framework, right? So the first and the foremost and very important is the risk. So what is risk? If I even talk about risk to a lot of security professionals, they don't have a standard and a consistent definition about a risk. So it is very important that everybody must have a standard and a consistent understanding and explanation of a risk. So what is a risk? It's an effect of uncertainty on objectives. Very simple, very crisp, which means that any uncertain activity which has some kind of impact or effect on the overall objectives. It can be positive or it can be negative or it can be both, right? So that is called a risk, right? So very, very simple, right? If your objective is to safely move from point 1 to point B, from point A to point B, and this is your objective, right? But if anything, any activity which happens in between, and that can hamper your safe arrival to the point B, that simply means that it's a risk, right? Or the risk could be positive also, that you can take a risk which might help you to reach faster to that point B, right? So that is a risk. And there are a few other factors which impact the risk, or which which can change the overall shape or the size or the context of the risk, which are the threats or vulnerabilities we will talk about, right? And this is a paradigm shift from chance or probability of loss, right? Which means that earlier we used to talk about that risk is a chance or it's a probability of loss, but now it's not that. It's the effect of any uncertain activity on your objectives, right? And next is the risk management. So what is risk management? So risk management is the coordinated activities to direct and control an organization with regard to risk, which means that you know that if you have to reach from point A to point B, what kind of steps you have to take to reach point B safely, right? So that is a risk management, right? Very simple. Stakeholders are persons or organizations which can be affected by the decision or the activity, right? If you have to reach from point A to point B, but if you don't reach to point B safely, what are those people who might be impacted with your non-arrival to that point? So that is those are the stakeholders, right? Very easy. Risk source is element with the potential to give rise to risk. So all those sources from where the risk can arise, that is called a risk source. Let's say if you are moving from point A to point B, and in between there is a dense forest, so that dense forest could be a risk source from where wild animals can attack on you, and that might lead to some kind of risk. The event, very simple, occurrence or change of circumstances, right? Very simple. If you are traveling from point A to point B and there is some dense forest and any wild animal attacks on you, that is an event, which can change the overall circumstances. And the consequences, what will be the consequences if the wild animal attacks on you? What can happen, right? You might get injured or you might kill the wild animal. So any kind of consequences or outcomes can be there. So this is called the consequences, right? The likelihood, what are the chances, that wild animal can attack on you? If you are moving from a dense forest, you are unarmed, you are traveling, on an unsecured vehicle, maybe a two-wheeler, or you're going by walk. So the chances of a wild animal attacking on you will increase, right? But if you are traveling with a group of people in a secured four-wheeler, and even the chances of the wild animal will decrease, but even if they attack on you, the chances of you getting harmed will also be very less, right? So that is how the likelihood works. It is the chance of something happening, right? How likely or unlikely that event can happen. The control measures are simply the risk management process we do, and what are the activities we do in the risk management. These are the controls, right? Risk appetite, level of risk an organization accepts in return of an accepted value, which means that even if you have taken all the measures, everything you've done, but still there is some kind of risk which is always left behind, right? So that is called a risk appetite, that how much risk you can accept to achieve your objective, right? That is called the risk appetite. Even though we have gone through some of the key important definitions, there are a few more definitions which if you are interested, just comment on this video and I will just again maybe make some another video to explain those topics as well. So the next very important topic is the core components of the ISO 31000. If you can see on the screen that there are three circles, these are the actual frameworks of the ISO 31000, and we will explain all of these topics one by one. So what are those three components I explained in the beginning? So these are the principles, right? There are 8 principles, and then we have the framework, right? How the principles are used, and then we have the process, that how the principles and framework are put into a process of the risk management. So we will cover all these three important components of ISO 31000. So first of all is the ISO 31000 principles. So what are the principles? So principles provide the guidance, right, on the characteristics of the effective and efficient risk management, communicating its value and explaining its intention and purpose. Very simple, that which means that principles are the guiding path, right? It explains that what is ISO 31000 and what are its intentions and what are its purpose, that why ISO 31000 exists, why it was designed, right? So that is the core idea behind the principles, and there are 8 principles, and we will just discuss all of these 8 principles one by one. First is the integrated, which means that this is the intention, that we want to make it integrated with the organizational activities. It is not a standalone, it is integrated with the existing activities. It is structured and comprehensive, which means that it contributes to the consistent results, right? It is structured, which means that it provides you the same steps every time, everywhere you implement ISO 31000. So which means that if you follow similar steps, you follow similar frameworks, you will have a consistent outcome, right? So that is what it helps. The structure helps to get the consistent outcome. Next is the customized, which means that it is not a hard and fast rule that you have to follow these steps, and if you don't do that, then you are not ISO 31000 compliant, which means that it can be customized as per the requirements of an organization, right? It can be tailored as per the requirement. Okay. And the next is inclusive, which means that it is not like the security or the risk manager is dictating the terms to the stakeholders, right? It includes the stakeholders, and without the involvement of stakeholders, ISO 31000 will not be effective. That is why it is inclusive, right? The next is dynamic, which means that it adopts as per the changing environment. So even if the environment is changing, new risks are coming, you can easily adapt to the new risks, new threats, and that's why it makes it dynamic, right? And the next is best possible available information, which means that ISO 31000 intends and right to use all the best available information for the decision making, for the risk assessment, for the risk management, right? It's not like that if you have set one rule 30 years back, then you have to keep using that for the next 50 years. But it's not like that, right? It will keep evolving, it will keep improving, right? Next is the human and the cultural factors, which means that the important part is that without human and the cultural involvement, ISO 31000 cannot be successful, which means that let's say if you have implemented ISO 31000 in your organization, and you have come up with the what you call some kind of concept that you should be checking the bags of all the employees because we have identified that there is a risk of information leakage, but your culture, your organization doesn't say that. They say that we trust our employees. So that is not where you can just go and start dictating, and you can go no what you call against the culture of an organization. That is where you have to be flexible, you have to be customized, you have to customize and find other ways which can include the human and cultural factors into the consideration, right? And then we have the continuous improvement, which means that it will keep improving. It follows the PDCA cycle: plan, do, check, act, right? So it means that if you have done something, you implement that, you check that, and again you that implement that, right? So that is how the 8 principles work together to create value and protection. So I hope no, it is clear. And the next is the frameworks, right? So these are the important frameworks that how ISO 31000 supports the risk management, right, or the organization's key activities and functions. So there are, if you can see, there are 5 important frameworks, right? And these are integration, design, implementation, evaluation, and improvement. So it's kind of PDCA cycle. If we talk about in a very simple language, right? So you plan something, that is your planning. You implement that, right, and then you check, right, whether it's performing well or not, and then you act upon that, you make improvements. That is PDCA. And the one more part which has been added here is the integration, which means that it integrates with the existing functions or existing management frameworks, right? So that is how the framework works here. So I hope it is also clear. The next very important is the framework. Oh, sorry, it's not the framework, it's your process, right? So my mistake. So it is not framework, it is the process, that how ISO 31000 risk management or risk assessment process works. So I have already made a video on the risk assessment process. So if you are interested, you can just follow the link right on my top of the video, and you can visit that video. I have explained in detail how the risk assessment works, but still I'll just give you a brief overview looking at this diagram. So at the risk assessment framework, the very important part is the scope, context, and the criteria. If you don't have a scope, you don't have a context, and you don't have a criteria, what you are going to evaluate, what you're going to find out, what's the objective of the risk assessment, you cannot start risk assessment process, right? So first you have to set your context, your criteria, and your scope. Then you can start working on the next steps, which is the risk identification, right? So before the risk identification, you talk about the assets identification, right? So if you don't have the assets identified, you cannot start working on the risk identification. So assets are tangible and intangible, right? So these are the kind of assets you have, right? And then you have the assets, then you set some value against each assets, and then you start identifying the risk. How do you identify the risk? For that, you have a process where you talk about the threats, you talk about the vulnerabilities, right? That what are the existing controls, right? If you have an existing control, you talk about those controls, and then you see if there are any vulnerabilities in those existing controls. If yes, then what are the threats which can create a risk? So threat is any event. It could be man-made, it could be natural, right? So these are the threats. that can pose the risk. Once you have the vulnerability, you have the threats, then you talk about the likelihood and the possibility or the consequences, right? So that is a simple, how do you call, the risk assessment process. So it's you talk about these risk register, right? So where you have risks identified here, you have vulnerabilities, you have threats, you have likelihood, you have impact here, and then you give a risk score here, right, which is a multiplication of likelihood and impact, and then you come up with some kind of a value, and then based on value you give it a category like risk value, right? It could be a high risk, it could be low risk, it could be medium risk, right? So then after that you talk about the controls, then we have the existing controls, right? You talk about what are the existing controls and what are the controls which are required for the mitigation of that risk, right? So this is how it works, the controls, right? So this is a kind of risk register I just created for you. And then we talk about the risk metrics, where we have this kind of metrics where we have five by five or four by four. It depends how you want to use it, but yeah. So this is just a brief overview. And once you have the risk identification done, right, you do a risk analysis. So what is the risk analysis? You identify what is the likelihood and what is the probability, and then you give it some kind of value, which is a risk scoring or a risk value, and then based on that you do the evaluation, which means that then you prioritize which risk should be treated first, and what are the top 10 risks which should be treated first, right? So that is called a risk evaluation, right? And once you have a risk evaluation done, you talk about the risk treatment, that how do you want to treat. So I made a video on which we have talked about all the risk treatment processes. So you can just go and visit and watch that video as well if you're interested in that topic as well, right? So this is where we will stop talking about the ISO 31000 process and move on to the next topic, right? I hope that so far you have understood the concept, right? And then we have the implementation and implication, that how you can implement this standard into your organization's goals, right? So first of all, right, the intent. We talked about that. The intent is that it can be integrated into the existing management system, so you don't have to create a separate for that. And again, the very important is that it is a non-prescriptive, which means that ISO 31000 doesn't rigidly, or it doesn't have the hard and fast rules that you have to follow all these steps of ISO 31000, but it gives you a framework, right? But it depends on you whether you want to follow that framework or you want to make some changes in that. So that's up to you. So it doesn't require that 100% conformance to the ISO 31000 frameworks, right? And the next is leadership role. The very important part is, if the senior leadership is not aligned to the ISO 31000 framework, you cannot drive it. So you have to align the leadership so that it can go from a top bottom, top down approach. So it comes from the leadership, and it then covers the bottom line, right? So this is the implementation and the implications, and then we have certification adoption, how you can get certified and how you can adopt it. So very easily, that ISO 31000, like other certification like 9001 or 27001, it doesn't certify organizations, right? So you can't say that our organization is ISO 31000 certified, because no, it doesn't give you that certification. But yes, individuals can do the certification and they can say that I am a ISO 31000 certified, right? So that is how it is. And based on the current data which I have found, that it has been adopted in 82 countries and in 23 languages, which means that people are adopting, organizations are adopting this standard, but not as an organizational certification, but as an individual. But yes, they follow the framework of ISO 31000 in their organizations, right? And the next is that criticism, that why people think that this standard is not comprehensive, or there are some uh, a criticism against this standard as well, which means that it lacks a solid conceptual foundation, which means that it just gives you the framework, and sometimes they say the language is misleading and ambiguous, ambiguous, and it doesn't give you the clarity, and people can start interpreting things on their own, right? And sometimes it also, people have talked about that it is not practical, right? It doesn't give you clarity in the complex settings, which I have also found is true, right? And some people say that it lacks integration with the modern decision theories and formal risk methodologies, which I have not experienced so far. But yes, if somebody have found it, maybe there might be some reasons, right? Uh, and Yeah, these are the few criticism which I have found against this certification, right? And if you're interested, you can also go and look into the other certification which are similar to the ISO 31000. So ISO 31000, the part of ISO 31000 is another ISO standard, which is 31073, which gives you the vocabulary, the complete vocabulary, right? We talked about some of the terminologies in the initial phase of the video, but if you are interested, you can just search for this 31073 online, and if you find any relevant document, you can just go through the vocabulary. And then we have 9001, we are aware of that. And then we have the techniques. So there are around 25 to 30 techniques which I found in the 31010 standard, right? Which talks about all the risk assessment technique, Delphi technique. We have 5 Ws, right? 5 Ys, right? And then we have fishbone analysis, we have SWOT analysis. So all those risk management techniques are explained in this standard, right? Then we have other ISO standards such as 14001, 27001, 45001, 22001, right? So a lot of other standards we have. So you can just look into this. So I hope this video will really help you to learn more about the ISO 31000. And with this, I'll stop the video. But at the end, we have some MCQs, and if you're interested to stay for maybe few more minutes, please stay, and we will talk about the questions. And at the end, I'll give you the answer keys. But before that, you can keep writing down your answers, and then at the end, you can tally your answer, that how many correct answers you had. Based on the video, right? So first question is, what is the primary aim of ISO 31000? I'll give you 5 seconds. You can look into that, write down your answer. Maybe you can pause the video and then keep going on, right? The next is how ISO 31000 define risk. That's very easy, right? The next will be which of the following is not one of the 8 principles of ISO 31000? We talked about in the initial, and it's very obvious if you look into the options, right? Why can't organizations be certified to ISO 31000, right? Which of the following is not a part of the risk assessment process? Which core component supports embedding risk management into decision making? Which principle emphasizes the need to adapt to the risk management organizational context? What is the role of leadership and commitment in the framework? Which of the following is the key activity in the risk management process? And these are the answer keys. You can just take a screenshot and maybe tally the answers. And that's it for today's video. And I must say thank you so much for your time, right? And I hope this will really help you to understand the concept. And just comment and let me know if you are interested in any other topic for me to cover, and I'll make a video on that.